Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. Recently, I traveled to the forests of Pennsylvania looking to identify the origins of a particular myth which has long been the subject of speculation. Here we are in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, going through the old indigenous trails towards the Governor Dick Tower. It's absolutely gorgeous out here. My girlfriend Katie does not like the pollen.
I jumped on a bug.
But we're trudging onward. We're here today looking at the paths of Governor Dick, also known as the Clarence Shock Memorial Park. Let me briefly run down this history for you. The lands throughout Pennsylvania were home to countless indigenous people, and this particular portion of the landscape on the mountains between Lancaster and Lebanon counties was of particular interest to numerous tribes, including the Susquehannock, who not only hunted these grounds, but also created lush paths marked by giant boulders, most of which still stand today, and are used for the basis of the hiking trails in Governor Dick Park. The size and stature of the ancient indigenous structures is hard to contemplate, as by colonial times, the entirety of this region became known as Furnace Hills, and the trees were apparently cleared and replanted numerous times over the years in production of coal, which is even more remarkable given some of the trees in this forest, as you can see, stand close to 200 feet tall today. We're told this process was begun by one Peter Grubb in the 1700s, who quickly sold the lands on Governor Dick to the Coleman family, who furthered the operation. Even more interesting, we're told the name Governor Dick actually arises not from a politician, but rather from a slave of the Coleman family. Reports conflict, and the stories are exaggerated at best, but we're told the Coleman family ran the furnaces on the mountain using slave labor. According to the Governor Dick organization website, Dick was the last slave purchased by the Coleman family to work on the furnace, quickly rising to one of the leads in coal production. By 1776, Dick was well known to the community in the region and was the last to remain in service to the Colemans before either gaining his freedom or escaping in the year 1796. A possible explanation for his moniker is that the foundry owner, Coleman, followed a common practice at the time, fostering the election of a slave leader and giving him the title of governor. Governor Dick is the namesake for this particular portion of the mountain. Robert Coleman, being the last of the line of Colemans to run the furnace into the 19th century, was also considered quite the venture capitalist, and through his enlightenment, realized to benefit the workers of his furnace, he would construct one of the first amusement or theme parks in the entire country. He built railway lines, including meticulous construction of lines that reached up the mountainside to his furnaces. Along one of his railway lines, built to transfer ore in and out of his mountainside empire, he decided to create a park for the enjoyment of his employees and their families in the woods in the valley around this stop. It was named Mount Gretna, supposedly after the Scottish border town of Gretna. The park steadily grew. Refreshment stands, an exhibition hall, a lake from the dammed Conewago Creek, a rather posh hotel built at the west end of it. As an entertainment for visitors to his park, Coleman built the narrow gauge railway, 2-foot gauge, which started adjacent to the main Cornwall and Lebanon Railroad station nearest to the park, ran beside Soldier Field and behind the lake, passed in front of the massive hotel, and across what is now Route 117. To this day, narrow gauge railway enthusiasts consider the short-lived Mount Gretna Railway to be one of the most fascinating to ever exist. However, seemingly going hand in hand with this further development at Governor Dick, we're told the United States National Guard of Pennsylvania began a 50-year occupation of the land in the year 1885. The Conewago Creek was dammed around this time, creating Lake Conewago, and the narrow gauge railroad followed this new path. Throughout this somewhat secretive occupation of the mountain as a training site, we have multiple pieces of architecture which may or may not be dated to this time period. Yet, to actually date these now ruinous structures is very difficult. The Conewago Hotel, completed officially in 1909, had over 125 rooms and was essentially one of the largest resort hotels in Pennsylvania upon its completion, yet it was all but abandoned just 25 years later. With the onset of the Great Depression and World War II, Mount Gretna sat nearly entirely empty. A landscape full of turn-of-the-century masterpieces was left unoccupied. Most of the hotels were torn down, and in 1933, the amusement park was closed. During this dip, the Great Decline, the majority of Mount Gretna and Governor Dick was purchased by Clarence Schock, who ended up owning over 1,100 acres of land on the mountainside. According to the modern narrative, Clarence not only developed the land further, eventually reopening Mount Gretna to the public, but he actually paid to clear the ancient paths of Governor Dick, and Clarence himself was said to have restored at least 5 towers, all roughly 60 feet or 6 stories or taller, around his new landscape, all dated to the 1880s, looking to find the perfect location for his home. Eventually, Clarence settled on a new tower, and the rest were torn down. A rather interesting narrative, to say the least, but we must consider the architecture of the home. It was essentially a red brick tower, much like a water tower, which was paneled with siding and made to look like a proper home. We only have a few surviving images of this unconventional design. Eventually, the lands of Governor Dick became overrun with trespassers. Clarence Schock passed in 1955, donating much of Governor Dick to become public land. However, his tower home became the target for vandals and was eventually torn down. I find it really fascinating that we have this location that, since the earliest record of this location, it was first very important to the indigenous people. Now, what they constructed in this area We are not entirely sure, but we do have massive trails that are lined with massive boulders all along the mountainside. Then following this, we have some of the most important furnaces to President George Washington being founded on this very same mountainside. And these furnaces continue to operate for roughly 100 years before then the United States military comes into the very same mountainside to occupy it under the auspices of training. And at the same time, while the furnace is still operating, we have one of the very first amusement parks in history in the United States operating on this mountainside. If that is not a questionable history, I do not know what is. The Sicko Company, led by Mr. Schock, designed and built the still-standing observation tower in 1954. The reinforced concrete and steel structure stands 66 feet tall with a diameter of 15 feet. Separate shafts run up and down with steel ladders and wooden safety backboards connecting the resting platforms every 7 feet and 4 inches. So I believe I'm just going to wrap up my narrative on the video there. I did visit this site, and I've been going to Governor Dick for many years. Really, since I was in high school, I've been taking trips here to go on hikes. It's a place that I absolutely love to go, and this was the first time I got to take my girlfriend Katie there. So it was an absolutely amazing experience, and I just wanted to be able to share these photographs with you and share a little bit of the history, because every time I go there, there's always a ton of people there, but not a lot of people know the true history of this location, how it's tied back to the United States government, how it's tied back to the massive furnaces that used to be here, and all of the old architecture that is hidden within this forest. So I thought I would share these images with you. I would love to hear your opinion about it down below, and I can't wait to talk to you all on the next video. Let me know which photograph stands out to you the most, and if you like seeing me do this boots on the ground research, let me know and we can get more videos like this out there for you.